Okay, welcome to episode 8. As you can see, I have done my wiring. So let me explain what I did, and just a caveat, I am a numpty. Never done this before, so this is the first time for me. Lots of research, lots of homework, lots of talking to people. So it might not be the perfect system, but it does work. So here's what I've done. Joined these two batteries together, positive to positive, negative to negative, and what that done has doubled, kept it 12 volt, but also doubled the amp hours. 69 amp hours each, so what's that, 138 amp hours I've got in these batteries. So my solar panels, which are been professionally fixed to the roof, comes down through this cable and runs in positive negative in from the solar. Then the battery positive negative comes out, and it's positive on one battery, negative on the other, and what that does is it charges both batteries at the same time. So too with using the batteries, I've run from positive through an isolation switch. It's also a 50 amp fuse as well. Just as a safety thing, I can also press that button and switch off all my 12 volt. So positive through the isolation switch, positive to the fuse block, and then negative of the other battery runs to the negative of the fuse block. So both batteries are getting charged at the same time, both batteries are getting depleted at the same time, which is apparently the best way to manage these batteries. The solar charge controller, it manages, you can see it's flashing away there because I'm just sitting 99%, which is 100. If I use anything in the bus that stops flashing, you'll see that the solar panels will start charging it. It's sitting at 13.8 amps, which I believe is pretty much good to go. So that little charge controller is doing its thing, and there's my fuse block. And you can see positive from one terminal of one battery, negative from the terminal of the other battery. That way the power being drained is being drained from both batteries, not just one doing all the work and the other one feeding off. Apparently that's most important to keep your batteries happy. So once the negative and positive have been connected, that fuse block becomes essentially live, I guess. So all the wires that are coming off USB ports, whatever you use for 12 volt, positive goes into the positive section, I guess, of the fuse block, and the negatives go to the negative section, and that fuse completes the circuit. And they pop, obviously, if too much heat gets in those wires, which they shouldn't, because I've used 6mm wire, which is probably over the top for what I'm using, but I figured if I'm going to do it, I might as well try and do it properly. On this side are the light wires that came. They go back up through that same thing and then run along in there, and you can see I've set them up. So let me walk you through. So yeah, that's kind of what I've done. I've positive to positive, negative to negative, joined them up, double size of the battery, kept them 12 volt. Then positive of one battery to the positive of the fuse block, negative of the other battery to the negative of the fuse block, and then all my red and blacks run off that with a fuse that completes the circuit. Solar power, solar panel into there, battery coming out into there, and again positive of one battery, negative of the other, and both of them are joined up. So that hopefully should keep both topped up, both drain at the same time. That'll manage it all good. So I've run all my cable along here under the bus, under the edges, and if I keep walking up, you can see I've set up USB ports on that side, USB ports on that side. They're little Bluetooth wireless speakers. They actually can join together and become stereo, but I can hook my iPhone up to it or whatever. So that'll run off 12 volt. I don't use the bus's power. For when we pull up and we've got music, it's all good. It's not running off the bus's power, which I'm leaving alone. That's 24 volt, and I'm leaving them alone. Downlights there I put in. You just press them and on they come which is very cool. Press again and they turn off. I've got USB and cigarette lighter set up here in this wall. That's where the television's going. A little telly that's going to be able to swing out, so you can actually have it outside as well, so we can watch the footy outside. And that will have a Bluetooth hookup for these little stereo speakers. So that's sound and TV in the back. I've obviously wired in the vent, which I installed, I think, episode 1 or 2. And that works a treat off this little remote. It's an extraction fan as well as a blowing fan. I just press that button there, and she'll stop and then start spinning the other way, which is fantastic. I can thermostat set it. Yeah, it works a treat. And just turn it off, which is all good. The lights I got from Australian Direct, which is a 12-volt company on the Sunshine Coast. Great little system, almost just plug and play, and they come with a remote. And you can see there's a little remote thing just there, which I need to push up a bit better, but press the on button and on she comes on both sides. And I've done the same on here. So I press them on, and on come those lights. You can actually make them orange or yellow, I guess you'd call them, for bugs at night. And they work on both sides, which is fantastic. And then I just turn them off, which is cool. Over here, I've done my plumbing, which is a fairly simple little setup. Now, the idea behind that was, instead of having containers under the bus, which I've seen a lot of people do, you know, and they have a port outside the bus, we've decided that we're just going to run 25 litre containers. That way we can change out the water if it sits there for too long. We can carry water if we want to. We can just go and fill up the 25 litre thing if we want to. It's just much simpler for our, I guess, what we're doing. We're not living in this bus. It's a camper. It's a go away for a week type thing. So I didn't want stagnant water sitting in, you know, sitting under the bus somewhere and not knowing how clean it was and that sort of stuff. So simple little tap system there and there, which will switch it all off manually, and then I can just unscrew it and go and fill it up, put it back in again. It's a pressure pump, which I got from Bunnings. It's just some really quite simple cabling that you would do for any sprinkler system, I guess, and then that runs up there. So it works off pressure, just sits there, and when I use it, I've got water, and I can switch that to stream or flicking, and that just drains into this little thing here, which is a 15 litre container. And again, once that starts to fill up a bit, I can just pull that out, empty it anywhere, but it is self-contained. So that, I'm happy with that. That's going to do us fine. I'll put some sliding doors in there that'll run off, you know, that have magnets on either side, which will stop them moving when we're travelling, and then I'll obviously got to strap them in. I am getting a little, I think, a little 12-volt hot water system. Yeah, probably not that flash, but it'll give us some heat. And then I'll just T-piece off the pressure pump, run the water into the cold section of that, of the hot water system, and then the hot comes straight up into the hot connection of this. So the plumbing, really quite simple. Pressure pump, couple of valves, bit of connecting, make sure it doesn't leak, use some plumber's tape, and I'm just using containers which will just swap out, which is fantastic for what we need. Last but not least, I'm getting a 12-volt fridge. I'll get that next time. It's a fridge freezer, runs about 50 amps an hour, 50 amps a day to keep it nice and cold. I've got 400 watts of solar, which is, you know, I've got 138 amp hours of battery. So I'm pretty sure the solar will keep them batteries happy, which will keep the fridge happy, but we'll see. I'm going to sort of trial and error. If the batteries can't do it, then I'll just upgrade the batteries to
120 amp hour each, which will give me 240 amp hours, which should be plenty. It just depends on how good the solar, 400 watts of solar, keep those batteries happy. Now once it's all done, that toilet can move down into here, and I'll lock that in place, and then fridge will create its own wall, and then kitchen bench all the way along there. That'll have a hinge up, and then storage under there with drawers and pantry and clothes and that sort of stuff. I did swap the battery box, as you can see. I had it on this side, but there's a big relay system there as well, and again we're going to probably build a little cupboard there for, you know, stuff you're always going to grab for outside, fly spray and all that sort of thing. So I'll put the battery box on that side, and that works fine. That works great. So there we go. I've got my wiring done. I've got USB ports, I've got lights, I've got plumbing. Last but not least will be cleaning all that up, creating that wall for the fridge. Then I'll get the mattress stuff all done, and the table cushion, so that'll become a complete bed. Then we curtain it up, and then all the trimmings. So trimmings will be like this sort of stuff. You know, I'll sand all that back, get that all nice and clean, and then put some nice timber trim around the place. Lots of little bits for timber trimming, but that's all cosmetic. Still got to clean that up, and air conditioning, clean that up, but that's all trimming stuff. So there we go. Electricals, plumbing, USB ports, cigarette lighters. I can add as many as I like. I've got another 6 ports here that I can run more cabling. So I can really go to town on my USBs and cigarette lighters for other stuff, and we'll just see how we go once I build that kitchen. I'm probably going to get a 12 volt inverter, a 1000 watt inverter. That will kill the batteries, but we'll see. That'll give us at least 240 if we want to charge laptops or anything like that. So there we're at. Wiring, plumbing, very happy. It's coming along really well, and I'm getting at the tail end of it. So that's episode 8. Yeah, got any questions? Again, I've got no idea really. I've just sort of slowly done the wiring and did the research and the homework, and so I'm no expert. It's probably not the ideal system, but it does work. So there you go. See you next time. Cheers.